Hello, today is Monday, March 7th, 2016, and I am your host, Sue Brown, and welcome to info2rail, your freight train to modern media. How y'all doing today? I want to tell you, here in New York, it is an absolutely beautiful day. Sun shining, 55 degrees, and absolutely beautiful. I want to welcome you all to our show, and we have a great show in store for you today. We are very fortunate to have ufologist Ali Siadatan today with us. First, we're going to take a little glimpse into the missing person files. The FBI and Atlanta Police Department are assisting in the search for Ashley Brianna Wayne, age 15, of Lake Mount, Georgia, who was last seen in the evening hours of February 28th, 2016. She was last tracked to the Atlanta, Georgia area. Ashley requires daily medication she does not have with her. Ashley is 5'5", 125 pounds, has dark brown hair and blue eyes. She was last seen wearing dark pants and a dark shirt. Anyone with any information on her location, please call the Rabun County Sheriff's Office at 706-782-6226 or 706-782-3612 or call your local 911. As I tell you guys each and every week, this is so important to me. I have such a passion to find these missing persons and at least either bring them home safe or at least bring closure to the family. That has got to be the most just devastating thing is not knowing. And I think for all of us, that's the truth of it. But just imagine that being your child or your loved one. We got to band together, guys, and at least do our part. Secondly, we have Brooke, Alabama. State police and the FBI are searching for Brooke Bridges, age 16, after she was discovered missing from her home in Brewton, Alabama on February 8th, 2016. When her father awoke at 4:30 a.m. for work, he found the front door ajar. Her family recently moved to the area from Montezuma, Georgia. Her parents think she may have been abducted. She had nothing but her pajamas and glasses, no shoes, no jacket, and it was 20 degrees that night. She is 5'3", weighs 100 pounds, has blue eyes, her hair was dyed royal blue, and her ears are pierced. She was last seen wearing a spaghetti strap tank top, black sweatpants, and purple glasses. Brooke may be in need of medical attention. This is what I said, you guys. You know, these poor girls, you have no idea what they're going through and what they're suffering and, you know, how lonely and scared they are. We've got to find these people and we've got to bring them home safe. I mean, it's such a passion of mine that I just have to get these out there to you. Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to have Ali Siadatan with us. Stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back with Ali Siadatan. Born in Iran, Ali has been involved in a lifelong search into spirituality. He feels that the hand that has guided him through life has led him into the examination of the relationship that exists between angels and UFOs. After finishing a master's degree in French language and literature at the University of Toronto, Ali decided to pursue his passion for the Chinese arts of Kung Fu and Tai Chi and open a center. Today, joined by his wife Shellie, they run a martial arts and health center in downtown Toronto. His documentary, UFOs Angels and Gods, is his first attempt at directing and writing for the audiovisual arts. His research into UFOs has inspired him to write a fiction book that he is now working on, as well as a second documentary on alien implants and RFID chips. Hello, Ali, and welcome to info2rail, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Sue. I'm happy to be here.
Can you start out by telling our listeners about you and what you do and how you got started in doing it?
Yeah, I have had a kind of a lifelong search for spirituality. It began where in Iran, where I was born, there was an Islamic revolution in 1979, 1980, and religion really came to the forefront of everyone's consciousness. It was something that was now imposed, essentially. So people had different reactions to it. My reaction was that I wanted to know what was inside of it. Where did these ideas come from? The Quran was in a foreign language. It was in Arabic, and I was a school child, and you had to now memorize certain passages and do certain prayers. And I wanted to know what was I saying. What was the meaning of these utterances? And that was kind of the beginning of my spiritual journey. We moved from there to France, and France was kind of a place where secularism is championed, and what you really learn about is critical thinking. So you're supposed to question everything. And so that was an interesting period where I learned to question things that I'd held to be true. In the Middle East, the paradigm that everyone lives under is a religious paradigm. Most people believe in a God, and whether you believe in God or not, in the Middle East, that's the general paradigm that everyone is functioning under. That's how the world is to be understood. It's more noble to imagine a world where there is a God than one in which there isn't. But in France, it was this idea of atheism and philosophy and critical thinking. And so I started to then really ask questions about Islam itself. When we moved to Canada, I guess I didn't realize that we had essentially moved into the Protestant world. And in the Protestant world, the Bible is seen in a different light than it is, let's say, in France, where Catholicism was the main form of Christianity, and the French Revolution was very much an anti-Catholic revolution. In the Protestant world here in Canada, there was a little bit more deference given to the Bible. It was a book of culture. It had perhaps information you need to know about archaeology, about history. It was an interesting book. Studying it wasn't necessarily seen as a bad thing. And so my spiritual journey then led me to the study of Eastern spirituality and the idea of seeking a direct contact with God. A form of mysticism, essentially, is what I was interested in, until I found myself inside of a study group that was studying different types of ideas, spiritual ideas, but suddenly the Bible was a part of that study group. And at first I felt uncomfortable, but I decided to hang around. I thought, well, if the leader of this group is talking about this book, perhaps I am the one who has something to learn, because he seems to be wise in a way that I've come to trust him as being a wise person. Maybe I should just hang around and listen a little bit. And so as I was listening to what was being said, I realized that I had never heard this before in my life. I thought, well, Islam says that Jesus was a Muslim prophet, that all the prophets were Islamic. Moses was a Muslim, Noah was a Muslim, Abraham was a Muslim, and Jesus was a Muslim, and they all brought Sharia law to humanity at different periods in time, but Muhammad had come to complete it. So for me, there was no point in studying the teachings of Jesus. I already was looking for something that was less based in law and in ritual and more in mysticism. And so I thought, well, what's the point of even looking into Christianity? It's just, medieval wars and empire building under Catholicism. And besides, Jesus is a lesser prophet than Muhammad, so I need to look at things that are deeper. But the idea that there was this divinity that had come into the world, and there was this idea of atonement, and somehow eternal life came and a connection to God came. This was all new information to me. I'd never heard it before in my life, and I thought, okay, what? I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to go along with this, and if somehow I do find that deeper connection and I become aware of the presence of God, then I'll know that there was truth in this idea. If not, it was just another religion, and I'll kind of like catalog it and move on with my life. So I wholeheartedly, gave, after making that deal with myself, I wholeheartedly gave myself to the prayer of accepting myself as someone who had fallen short and who needed this atonement and accepted the death and resurrection of Christ. And in the days that followed, a great spiritual upheaval came over me. My consciousness opened, and I was suddenly aware of the presence of God, and a great spirit came over me that I didn't even know what it was. You know, I went back to this group, and I'm like, this is what I'm experiencing. What is that? Oh, they said that's the Holy Spirit. I said, okay. And so I suddenly found what I had been looking for a little over 10 years of intense spiritual search. And so then I decided that, well, I needed to read the Bible. And I knew nothing. I'd never read the Bible. I only, someone had given me a pamphlet on the way to this study, and that's really the only thing I had, which had kind of the basic gospel stated in it. Wow. So I started to read the Bible, and that led me to the study of angels and prophecy, and how do you understand all of this? And that, was something I was looking to answer. And I had a UFO sighting that was very close-up UFO sighting, and that kind of thrust me suddenly in a whole new direction when it came to researching things.
Wow. I think the big question a lot of people are asking, and something that, is a question that's going around pretty big in our society, is how connected. And to me, it almost seems, inevitable that we're connected through these UFO sightings and these aliens. We're connected, spiritually in a way we don't even realize.
Well, that was kind of, we definitely are part of a larger story, whether we realize it or not. We are part of a larger story. So who are these aliens? That became a question. So I have a close-up UFO sighting, and now the question is, well, who are these aliens? And looking into the UFO phenomenon, first of all, I realized how well documented it was, that it was a lot of people from all around the world were having these sightings. These were credible people that we trust, with very important positions in society, our friends, our colleagues. Like when I was making this documentary, UFOs, Angels and Gods, I was down filming at the Convocation Hall here in the city of Toronto, where there was an expo where the Minister of Defense was going to come and speak. His name is Paul Hellyer, and he was the Minister of Defense under Trudeau. So we now have a Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, but his father was the Prime Minister, and when his father was the Prime Minister, this gentleman here was the Defense Minister, and he had a briefing where the Air Force came and told him that he needed to know that they were seeing alien ships, and he needed to be aware of that, and he was shocked. And so he called a few friends he had in the States, in the army there, and some generals, and they told him that they were seeing it as well. And he said that in those days, this was in the 60s, the idea was to weaponize space so that it's a first line of defense. And so he was coming to this convocation hall here at the University of Toronto for the first time to publicly explain what he learned as a government official, as a Minister of Defense. And so I was there filming, and a lot of the people who were waiting to get in, we were trying to interview them and film them. They were people who had very important jobs in corporations downtown, and one of their main concern was they didn't want any of their friends to know that they had come to a UFO event. And so I realized that a lot of the people who were having these sightings were, very sane. And then the research was incredible, going back to Project Blue Book and Alan Hynek, and from there, respectable researchers such as Bud Hopkins or Professor David Jacobs that I've now met twice, or Johnny Mack, who's now passed away, but he was the head of psychiatry for Harvard University. And he decided that he was going to research the abduction phenomenon and explain that this is nothing more than a modern-day psychological disorder akin to demon possession from the Middle Ages. But then in 1994, he shocked the academic world by publishing a book called Abductions, where he explained that this was all real, that these people were talking about something that had really happened to them, that his training as a psychologist allowed him to understand that as he was documenting and researching these stories. So I realized, well, I'm not the only one who's had a sighting, and there's a well-documented body of research, and there's lots of people out there. So the question then became, well, who are these aliens? And the other question, someone suggested that I look into the past, and I did, with things like Eric von Däniken and the ancient astronauts, Zacharias Sitchin, that perhaps this is not a modern phenomenon. Perhaps this is a phenomenon that goes all the way back to the very genesis of civilization, because, information was passed down to us. That is what is recorded in the ancient writings, that civilization began thanks to very specific bodies of knowledge: mathematics, astronomy, writing itself, architecture. Excuse me. Bodies of knowledge passed down to us by the so-called gods. And so the ancient astronaut theorists say, well, these are aliens, and they have visited the Earth a long time ago. They have visited the Earth through the ages, and they're visiting the Earth today. And there's a whole theory that ufology has today to explain this visitation we're having right now. So then that was interesting. Okay, so this is real, this is well documented, and it's happened in the past as well. Great. And then at this point, my interest was also very much in understanding the world through the Bible. I suddenly noticed that, hey, you know what? The Bible talks about the gods of these nations. Egypt, the gods of Egypt, in the very famous passage in Exodus that is read by Jews at the Passover, God says, I will judge the gods of Egypt, the Elohim of Mizraim. And these ancient astronaut theorists are saying, look, these gods were these UFOs. So I was like, okay, well, let me look at these passages. And I started to look at the passages. I've now discovered over 200 passages where these gods are mentioned. And the context clearly explains that these guys are the fallen angels. And there's lots of writings that point in that direction. And so then the question was, well, fallen angels, like, what is that exactly? And how does that fit in the story? So as I dug deeper, I realized that there was something very interesting about these books that supposedly had been handed down to us by the gods. They were these bodies of writing. They did not have human authorship. There was a whole section of literature that the authorship of which was attributed to something else other than humans. And these pieces of literature were extremely foundational for the rise of civilization. The latest example that we have of this, if from our point of view, from where we stand in history, the latest example that we have of this is the rise of Islam. You've got the Arabs who live in this peninsula, and they're flanked by two very sophisticated civilizations, the Persians on one side, the east, and the Greeks to the west. Byzantium is the capital of kind of the Greek culture there. And in the 7th century of the Christian era, in the 600s, one Arab gentleman by the name of Muhammad, he claims that he's receiving these revelations, these recitations. That's what the Quran means, recitations. And he then, within the span of his adult life, comes up with information that a society needs to structure itself. Every aspect of life gets suddenly spoken into. This is how commerce is going to operate. This is how you're going to worship this particular deity. This is how you're going to form a community of believers. This is how you're going to live. This is how you're going to get married. This is how you're going to act towards outsiders to this realm. And encouraged by this code, which gets put in writing after he dies, an army emerges that conquers both the Persian and Greek civilization, and bingo presto, the Islamic world is born. Now, if you go further back in history, you go, let's say, to the character of Jesus. Well, you've got this idea that the God of the Jews enters the human world as a man, as into the line of King David, And then he speaks these teachings, and the Roman world is altered completely. Polytheism is put aside gradually, and the monotheistic era emerges, and the Western world, the Roman world, is altered, and the teachings of this Jewish teacher become the foundation of Western civilization, and the New and Old Testament become the most important document of Western civilization. Again, information comes from the outside that alters the course of history and establishes worldview for us. And that is really at the heart of these structures of knowledge that has been passed down to us. Worldview. That is really one of the main keys of it. It presents a worldview, in addition to laws and how to live, but also how to connect to the deity. What is the spiritual mechanism by which we are to really have a very intimate relationship with the God that is behind these teachings? Then going back in history, well, you have the story of Moses. He's the head of a group of slaves. They come out of Egypt. He goes up on a mountain, comes back down, and boom, he's got an entire code that can organize a society into a civilization. And many of those laws, like the Ten Commandments, are still the basis of the legal system today. You still can't go around murdering people. It's you're encouraged not to bear false witness in courts and accuse people and all that stuff. So the whole idea, going back now from there, you got the Vedic texts of India, which Indian civilization in the Indus Valley, pops up when the Vedic text begins around 3,500 BC. You have the Egyptian civilization, and then you have the oldest civilizations of the world in Mesopotamia, like the Code of Hammurabi, which is handed down by the sun god Shams, who becomes Apollo to the Greeks. And we have the statues. We have two of them left of Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, receiving this code of law, which we have the entire code written out in this big statue from Shams, the sun god. So suddenly, I was noticing that, wow, civilization, life was planted on Earth, and this life was then seeded with knowledge. And this knowledge is at the basis of civilization itself, that we are living in the civilizations, that has been handed down to us by these codes. In fact, the Mesopotamians claim that the gods gave writing so that it could enshrine in it, it could encode in it their laws. And that's very important because these laws are the basis of society. And of course, humans have then, added to it, modified it, changed it, and worked with it. But the genesis is from elsewhere. They're very complex and they appear. So as I started to try to understand all of this from a biblical perspective, what I discovered was that actually the Bible told the story of a race, for a lack of a better word. And that race in the Bible is called Elohim in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew. It's been translated as gods in the plural. It's also sometimes translated as God in the singular, because it's true. The context of the passage very clearly makes it obvious whether we're talking about God or are we talking about the gods of the nations. And gradually I noticed that, wow, look, the God of Israel is presented as the God of the gods, El of the Elohim. And then it says that humans are the children of the Elohim, and you have this story of the creation of the humans, and then you have the story of the creation of the first farmer. Adam is presented in the Bible as the first farmer. He cultivates the ground. That's what he's created for. He's not told to go and live everywhere and multiply and fill the whole earth. He's told to stay put inside the garden. And he's made in the image of the leader of this multitude of beings called the Elohim. And the leader of these guys is the one who created time and space itself and entered it and created a multitude of beings, of which Adam is one of them. And so we were inside of a cosmic story. From the get-go, this book was presenting us as being connected to a larger reality, to a plurality of beings headed by God himself. And so we are part of the world of the angels and gods, if you will, And that's why we're involved in such a larger story. And so then going, kind of following the breadcrumbs, where it happened, well, it seems that there is a war happening, and there is deception from the very beginning. There is one of these guys who's older than us, who's been here inside of this universe longer than we have. He has an ambition, and his ambition is to become the leader of everybody and everything. And moving right there, we see in the Garden of Eden, he suggests an alternative reality. He changes our perspective of reality. He says, no, what you have been told is not completely true. In fact, it's not true at all. You won't die. You won't die at all if you eat from this, and you will know good from evil, becoming like one of us, like one of the gods, he says, one of the Elohim. And so they knew who these beings were. They had contact with them. And reality is altered. And as you kind of now follow the story, what you see is that humanity is destined for a very important place inside of this cosmic tale. And that is why humanity is targeted by this being and dragged down. And even though he doesn't kill us, he suggests something that gets us killed in the laws of the universe. He says, there's a kingdom happening in this universe. There are conscious beings, and God is at the helm. And there are laws in this universe of conscious beings inside of the universe. And we are now inside of that system. And so he simply suggests that we betray the laws that condemn us to death, the laws of God himself. So he puts God on trial, essentially. He says, look, I just made a suggestion to these guys whom you favor for this destiny. They took the bait. And from there's this idea of accusation. And so humanity then walks out into the larger world. The race of Adam walks out into the larger world. And I do believe there are many other types of humans already living there, because it says at the beginning that that man was made in the image of the Elohim, and it's plural, the gods. And then the story of Adam, I think, is a very special story, the special story of the one who was made in the image of the God of the gods. Because it says that right in the Bible. It says that then Adonai Elohim, which is the title given to the God of the gods, he then created Adam. While in the passage before that, it doesn't talk about Adonai Elohim. It talks about Elohim as a plurality. So there's many races on the earth, and then there's this first farmer who's introduced, and then when he comes into the larger world, it says that his children usher in civilization. One of them, is the leader of the first tent dwellers. Another one is the leader of the musicians. Another one brings in metallurgy, Tubal Cain. He brings in metallurgy. And archaeology has done a lot to dig up that, yes, it seems that the south of Mesopotamia really was the cradle of civilization, and huge amounts of knowledge appeared there that we don't quite understand how and why. But then the relationship continues between these beings and us. So these fallen angels present themselves as the gods of the nations. God chooses Israel out of the nations for himself and begins a process of redeeming Adam and placing him back into his proper spot in this universal story, in this galactic tale. So the idea that the story of the Bible, first of all, could be happening inside of time and space, inside of the universe, inside of the heavens, that we now see through the Hubble telescope, that we began to see through Galileo's telescope, and Sputnik opened our mind that you can actually go out there. So the idea that the story of the Bible doesn't need to be altered, and it doesn't need to be, the characters don't need to be turned into aliens. They can still be, these mighty angels coming from the throne room of the universe and being involved with us, but they just travel through the vast ocean of space, the way that we, who are apparently the children of God and have divine origins, we make boats and travel on water, and we have aeroplanes, and there's nothing wrong with that. And of course, apparently Jesus was God incarnate, and he traveled on little ships on the Sea of Galilee, which is more of a lake than anything else, and he rode on donkeys. And so he could also be in the middle of these chariots, in the middle of space. Of course, God doesn't need any of this, but he's entered his creation. and he is choosing, because you can't put a box around God and say he can't do something. He's choosing to be inside of these beings. So suddenly, the reality of the UFO phenomenon made the angels in the Bible very real to me. And then the narrative of the Bible gave these UFOs a meaning and context and identity and a role. And gradually, I could see that, okay, knowledge came from the fallen angels to the nations, and that's how civilization was born. God had chosen Israel and spoke his oracles through Israel's prophets, and then entered Israel himself as a person. So this is where we are in the story. Then his spirit was poured. Okay, so this is all going forward. This is all very real. This is actually history. And the UFOs, well, they were not the gods that they presented themselves as, and they're not the aliens that they're presenting themselves as today. They are part of this giant tail, and a third of them has rebelled against God under the leadership of one of these beings, and many worlds have fallen to them. And the race of Adam on the third rock from this particular sun in the Milky Way is also involved in this galactic tail, a tail that involves God himself. And these angels, both fallen and righteous, if you're going to call them in that Christian language, but I prefer that term Elohim. So that was a huge paradigm shift, obviously, for me.
So where do we see the Nephilim come into play?
Yes, that was a fascinating part of the whole story. So you look into the modern-day UFO phenomenon, and you realize that, hey, it takes you to abduction. And that led me to David Jacobs, who's the world's foremost abduction researcher.
Yep, I've had him on my show. He is incredible.
He's incredible. So he's saying that the abduction phenomenon is the heart of the UFO phenomenon. That's why they're here. They're abducting us, and they're creating hybrids. And Bud Hopkins, his colleague, came up with the term hybrids, and it's been used since the mid-'80s, early '80s, '83. And so this is the heart of the UFO phenomenon. It's clandestine. They have an agenda. It's a program. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And that's why they're not landing on the lawn of the White House and saying hello, because they have a plan. And it's rather dark if you just look at the facts. And even though he's very much of an empirical researcher, which is what I like about him, he doesn't bring a particular angle of spirituality or philosophy or anything, or New Age or anything into it, which is great. He's just looking at the facts and saying, look, the facts point to the fact that they're creating hybrids, and this is nefarious. Like they have a dark agenda. If you go and watch our documentary on thinkagainproductions.com, you will be able to, we have a very detailed interview of Dr. Jacobs in the documentary where you can see him explain all the stages of this program as he's recorded it from over 900 abduction sessions when I interviewed him for the first time, and now he's at 1,200 abduction sessions. I was just there in November speaking with him. You can see more clearly for yourself how is it that this conclusion is derived from the tale of abductees, that in fact hybrids are being created. And that was very interesting because, again, going back to the Bible is brought to life by these stories, and then the Bible provides identity. So then you go back, and suddenly we discovered that, hey, in the book of Genesis, it talks about the sons of God, the Benai Ha-Elohim, who are coming down, and they have sexual relations with daughters of Adam, and they create these children, which the Hebrew calls the Nephilim in Genesis chapter 6. And Jerome, who translated the Bible from Hebrew to the everyday spoken Latin of Romans, the Vulgate, he translated the word Nephilim as gigantus. And since his Bible became the main book of Western civilization for 1,400 years, and is the most influential copy of the Bible ever, the word giants kind of really entered the Western imagination through Jerome's translation, gigantus. So the Nephilim, wow, could this be real? Now, you have to understand, this was the mid-'90s when we were looking into these things. And in those days, well, no one was talking about, the community of people was talking about these things. It was very small. There was no internet. Like, Yahoo was the search engine for everyday people. And so you go on Yahoo and you type in Nephilim. Well, you got nothing, zip. Not a single website came up. I would talk to my friends who were in seminaries, and they would think I'm kind of crazy. They're like, no, we already know that this passage has to be read in a particular way that is talking about marriage between two human tribes. It has nothing to do with angels, having relations with humans. And it's been interesting for me to see over the years how much this Nephilim has become like an everyday language. So many people talk about it. So many people know about it. And it's become very much immediately accepted that this passage is talking about the commingling of two different races. And so this itself is important for me because it says, from my perspective, hey, God wants to really open up remove the veil and say, look, this is happening because it's going to be like the days of Noah, we were told. Jesus said it'll be like the days of Noah. And the days of Noah were the days of the Nephilim. So then it says in the Bible that this happened then and afterwards. And then when you started to read it, you find all these passages. Well, in Genesis, Abraham, fights the tribes of Nephilim. The kings of Elam, the Elamites, they lived in the south of what's today Iran. So if you go to let's say, take a map of Iran today, and you go to the southwest of Iran, and there's a province there called Elam to this day, and some of the oldest archaeological sites are there. And the Elamites, the book of Genesis says, Elam was the son of Shem, who was one of the sons of Noah. And they had many mighty kings, and the book of Genesis has these kings fight the tribes of the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Zanzumim, and they're mentioned there. Then when the Jews come out of Egypt, they come to this land, they send the spies in, and the spies come back, and they say, look, we can't go in. There's these Nephilim in there, or giants, the sons of Anak, one of the important families, the Anakim. So this was happening throughout the ages. You get to the story of Goliath. He was one of the descendants of the Nephilim, we're told. By the time of Goliath, what we're seeing is that the Nephilim tribes were being hired by human tribes as mercenaries in order to shift the balance of power. And so Goliath and his four brothers could have been hired by the Philistines to do that, and they were kind of the children of the Nephilim, their descendants. So you really see that the seeds are being mingled into the culture. My theory concerning people who are abducted today is that perhaps they are the descendants of, the widespread genetic connection between the Nephilim and us. So they have already a predisposition. So when they are abducted, the genes that are harvested from them in order to create these hybrids, perhaps their genes are better suited for this experiment because they already have something of the Nephilim in them. So suddenly, the modern day UFO phenomenon, the empirical evidence of people coming and talking about these tales of abductions made real, again, these dormant aspects of the Bible. You could, again, take it literally. You don't have to have some fancy explanation to understand what was being said in this ancient text. What was being said literally could actually be accepted. There was a hybrid race being created, because today we are hearing people tell the same story, and that there's a worldwide UFO phenomenon, and this corresponds to the return of Israel to its land. And this is very important because you see from the late 40s mass UFO sightings, UFO flaps we call them. Starting in the United States, it started with Kenneth Arnold in June 24th, 1947. And then lots of people started to come out on the heels of that testimony by Kenneth Arnold, who was a very respected man of his community. People started to come out, and they felt encouraged that they could also speak out what they were seeing. And that led to, of course, investigations and the UFO phenomenon. And here we are 50, 60 years later talking about it still, because it has never stopped. And this has happened in Western Europe, in various countries. In Mexico, it started in 1991 with the eclipse of the sun, where the UFOs appeared and have appeared since. So these UFO flaps have been appearing since the late 40s. And then once we looked into it and people came out with their testimonies, we realized, well, the heart of it is the creation of hybrids or Nephilim. Wow, why is this happening now? though these are the days of Noah. Why is it the days of Noah? What does that mean? So again, other passages in the Bible came online to explain and say, oh, I see. We see what's happening here is that we have entered into prophetic times, into times that are going to culminate into the coming of a new age. And this new age will be ushered in by, what Christians would call the second coming. In the Bible, it's often referred to as the great and terrible day of the Lord. And so history is moving forward, the history of the race that was planted here by the leader of the Elohim, a race that has had this continuous relationship where our civilization, our bodies of knowledge, the commingling of seeds, essentially it's all there. This book has always had the history. We've never been left in the dark. God has said, look, this is what's going on, guys. This is who I am. This is who you are. These are the different pieces of the puzzle. This is who these alien ships are that you're seeing around you. This is who the gods of the ancient world are. This is what their plan is. This is what my plan is. This is what I'm proposing. This is where I'm taking history. Are some of the big landmarks. And so it was really about dusting off and seeing it for what it was. Our minds have been clouded by the same voice that spoke to Eve and said, if this was said to you, well, it's not true. Let me give you an alternative perspective on reality. So we have been being brainwashed by alternative perspectives of reality that is coming from the deceiver. And while the truth has always been here, and that's what I find interesting, is that when you look at, let's say, the writings of the Vedic texts of India, or the Bhagavad Gita, which is the teachings of Baal, Krishna, one of the gods of India, and it's the main text of modern-day Hinduism, or whether you look at the Quran, the teachings of Allah, or you look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or you look at the Enuma Elish, which was the sacred text of Mesopotamia, or you look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or you look at the Avesta, which is the main text of the Zoroastrian religion, which governed the Persian civilization until the Islamic invasion of the 7th century. When you look at all of these religious texts that are attributed to the gods, they all have some commonalities, which is they give you worldview, they give you laws to live by, they give you a system of how to connect to the deity. But the Hebrew Bible, the Old and New Testament, is the only book out of all these books that actually tells you a story, which is supposed to be history itself, that divides itself between prophecy and history. God said and God did. It is the only document out of all of these revealed texts that has this quality about itself. So you can actually follow a narrative. It's pointing to the real world and it's telling you, this is who these guys are. Oh, this is who the gods of the nations are. This is who the nations are. This is who you are. This is where it's going. This is what's happening. These are historical events. When you see these events happen, know that this is going to come. It's the only book that has that complexity of prophecy. It doesn't mean there are not prophecies in the other ones, but the complexity of the interplay between history and prophecy, God said and God did, is really the underlying narrative of this book. Even the Gospels, they are meant to be the historical accounts of the fulfillment of the prophecies about the Messiah. There are things about the Messiah that were spoken, and we're only interested in recording those things that were said about him and happened on the stage of world history. We don't care about the parts of his life that don't fall within the scope of biblical prophecy. That's only why 3 years of his life is recorded. So it's a historical document that is here to prove once again, God said and God did. Oh, and then God said he would send the Holy Spirit. Well, that's the book of Acts. So that's when the Spirit arrives. And that creates a whole new phase in history where the worship of the fallen angels is pushed back, the worship of the gods is pushed back, and the one God of Israel becomes the norm of spirituality among humans. Well, today we don't say anymore, is there one God or are there many gods? We say, is there a God or isn't there a God? So our conversation has changed because of the Holy Spirit that's been poured over the nations and history has been altered. So again, the book of Acts is a historical document that is supposed to record the fulfillment of prophecy. So the narrative structure of the Bible is divided between history and prophecy. And this is important because it allows us to follow the breadcrumbs into real things. We can actually go and dig up nations and look into archaeology. We can go and look into the reality of these gods and the knowledges they gave and use the Bible as a roadmap to who is it that these people are. we can understand what's happening today with the return of the Nephilim and the rise of the UFO phenomenon. For instance, right now, the UFO phenomenon, the main idea coming out of it is that the saviors of the world have arrived. They heard the atomic blasts and they came here. Well, and they're going to save us. They're going to help us enter into a new age, and they are here to do that. Once again, the idea is being presented that there is an alternative source of salvation available to us. It's like, antichrist. People talk about the antichrist. Well, in the New Testament, in the letter of John, the word is actually anti-Christus, and it's different because anti means against, but anti-Christus, which is the word that's used in the Bible, means pseudo-Messiah, instead of the Messiah. It's not against, instead, and that's a big difference. It means that the spirit that claims that it is the solution, it has the answer, it is the Redeemer, it is the immortality giver, it is the light giver, it is the enlightenment bringer. So it's important to understand that if the UFO phenomenon is telling us, there's going to be environmental disasters coming, that's a very important message that's coming, and we are going to save you, well, perhaps this is another mask that the fallen angels are putting on. They are presenting themselves to our culture, to our civilization, to our scientific age, not as gods, but as aliens. And once again, they're presenting themselves as the people we should look up to. But remember, we are ourselves part of the race of the Elohim, because it says that, when Jesus was asked, why do you say you are divine? He said, well, doesn't it say in your own scriptures that you are Elohim and you are the sons of the Most High, you are the sons of El Elyon? So imagine that the story is happening in the universe. And these guys, it's kind of like a battle between the French and the English. These guys are actually part of the same type of creatures we are. And they walk around and they think and they have science. They're not very artistic, at least that's what the UFO phenomenon shows us. They're very much about rules and regulations and hierarchy. They lack that creativity that we have. They obviously have a different perspective into God because they believe they can defeat God, which would seem kind of insane. So they have a different perspective. They see the universe as a place of many laws and rules, and it's like a chess set. And if you can understand how to play this chess game, you can beat things. You can beat God himself. So they have a slightly different window into reality than we do, but they are generally speaking part of the same race and the story that we are. And that's why we're genetically compatible. I mean, how come is it that they can actually have children with us and create Nephilim and hybrids, whether it's in a laboratory or through sexual intercourse? Well, we must have an original donor. We must have the same original DNA. There must be a common thread between us. And so I think that when God entered the universe, he created from himself. He gave some of himself into all of his sons. And so they are called the sons of God. We are called the sons of God. So this is the story of a particular race. Now, how vast is the universe? What other dimensions are there? What other universes are there? How much larger is this tail? Who else are we going to meet out there? Well, we're not there. We don't have answers to these questions. But so far, what we are told by, our Father, we're told, listen, this is who you are, guys. This is who you are. This is your story. This is who these guys are. So the re-emergence of the Nephilim today, biblical Nephilim, well, if the story of hybrids is true, the hybrids are being created, then again the Bible presents these guys as the offsprings of fallen angels and men. Mesopotamian art records them. The Greeks record them. They were called the Titans by the Greeks. I would say in the English language, even though giants is the term we use, but demigods is really the word we use. They're also mentioned extensively in the Hindu scriptures, in the Mahabharata, the story of the sons of Pandu. Even Indra, who is the main deity of the Vedic text, is himself a hybrid. And so there's a whole history. There's lots of engravings of these guys. They look like very tall figures in ancient engravings, giving out laws and instructions. Here, I'll tell you a story. I was visiting some family in Iran, and I'd gone to Persepolis, which was one of the four capital cities of the Persian Empire. And I was walking around there, and it's amazing, the architecture and what these guys built, the pillars, and it's just mind-blowing. It's 2,500 years old, and it's something that, today we could do. And I was there, and there was a local man, and he brought his family for just, a Sunday out for a stroll. They had a picnic, and we were walking through this archaeological site. And I said to him, he was like a villager, and I said to him, hey, how do you think they built this stuff? And I kind of said it to him comically, like I wasn't expecting a serious answer. And then he surprised me. He said, well, it says in the cuneiform tablets that they had champions who lived among them. And these champions were giants. And they are the ones who built these. And I was like, really? And so there's this oral tradition. And he also said that it was in the cuneiform writings, in historical engravings, in the engravings that told the history of Persia. So this story is very much alive. You look at the island of Malta. Again, who built these gigantic structures in the island of Malta? The oral tradition among the Maltese says it was giants. So there is this story coming from the nations. There is the biblical record, and then there's the modern day evidence. Who are they? Again, we could come up with the different theories. They're trying to graft themselves into us in order to evolve us. But I trust this document rather than human theory, because humans, what do humans know? I mean, humans don't even know where they are because they don't know where the universe is. We don't even know where the universe is. Humans can't even see the back of their own heads, and they're going to come and tell us exactly what's in the mind of these beings. Like we're really superimposing our own thoughts on them, and there's a huge leap of faith here and supposition. But this document tells the future accurately before it happens over and over again. It points to the past accurately. Until the 19th century, Europeans and North Americans didn't really know about the existence of Babylon or Persia or Mesopotamia or even Egypt, really. It was something that archaeology started to govern. Egypt was in the 18th century that Napoleon was fighting the British in Egypt, and people started to see the pyramids and Sphinx and bring drawings into Europe. But it was really archaeology starting in the 1840s that started to dig up the most ancient cities mentioned in the Bible. Wow, this wasn't a fairy tale. We don't know if these characters existed, if history unfolded exactly this way, but at least we can see that these cities were real. And that is important, because if this book was a book of fairy tales, those cities would never be dug up. So there's a lot of evidence that says you can trust this. Who would have known, who would have ever imagined that at this time UFOs would be visiting us and hybrids would be created the way that the Bible says that was going to happen in this stage of history that leads to the second coming. So I trust the version of reality that is mentioned here over the theories that humans come up in their brief lives with their emotions. Someone hurt you as a child, someone said something to you, oh, you never read this, you reject that, oh, this is what you like, this is your personal idea, great. But you may be wrong. At least I'm putting my eggs in the basket of this document. So this is fascinating that hybrids are being created and that they had also been created in the past and recorded in the Bible and identified in the Bible. We know who they are. We know how they got here. We know at different times what their purpose has been, whether it has been to corrupt the line that leads to Messiah in the days before the flood, whether it has been to populate the land that God has chosen for his plans, in the case of when the Jews arrived to the land of Canaan. Whether today, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the rise of Nephilim today? Well, this is something that, we're looking into biblical prophecy to understand. They do have a role in the governing of the earth. They are going to create a society. They're going to have a leader. This leader is going to do miracles, we are told. He's going to have power, and he's going to deceive the world, and he is going to demonstrate real power. And so now I see that he's connected to these spaceships, and he has technology at his fingertips, and that his power is going to be great. And that is why the Messiah must return today, because the rise of the Nephilim is such that the power that is behind them is stronger than us, and would be overwhelming for us to deal with. Even though I really have to emphasize that this is a story with happy ending, that the Nephilim have been defeated always in the Bible. You look at the story of the flood, they're defeated. You look at the story of the kings of Mesopotamia and Abraham who beat them, they kill them, they defeat them. Joshua and Caleb, they chased them out of the land and they killed a lot of them. And apparently some moved to the Americas, and that's what L.A. Marzulli is looking into right now, is into the Nephilim in the Americas. And moving forward, once again, we see that these guys are defeated at the second coming. So the Nephilim is the story of losers. They are a race of losers. They are not a race of... I was giving a talk in a suburb of Toronto and about abductions and the rise of hybrids. And this woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I'm an abductee. And I believed her. And she was saying to me, I live in a subdivision around here, and it's full of these hybrids. And they live in the subdivision with us. They look after us. I know who they are. They know who I am. And it was right there in Auschwitz, like in a suburb of Toronto. So they're among us, and they're rising, and they're telepathic, and they have power sources behind them. They don't, at least the ones, Jacob's documents are not terribly smart. It takes time to accumulate the kind of information humans have. So I don't see them as being almighty. And Dr. Jacobs' research is, of course, limited. Let's say if the President of the United States is being abducted, or if the King of Saudi Arabia is being abducted, or if the President of Iran is receiving, neurological control and visions. We don't know that, because these guys don't come into the office of an abduction researcher, lie on his couch, and start opening up. We don't know that. So we don't really know the full scope of the penetration of this phenomenon. What we do know is that they are now living among us, that they are having independent lives, that they have neurological control, and that they navigate through abductees. So the abductees have played different roles at different times in this whole story, and at this point in time, the role that they're playing is to help integrate. And there's even stories where these hybrids will go to work with you, and they're just learning because they tap into your mind directly. And they're learning about your work and what you do. So where is it all going? Are they becoming fully functional, independent members of society? They're going to run for office. They're going to be in the background influencing abductees who have power and rank, who have office, who are in places of influence. I don't know. But what I do know is the Bible tells us that there's going to be a battle between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, and that there's going to be a David and Goliath story awaiting for us. And that David and Goliath's tale was a type, was a historical enactment of a future event. And the story is that Goliath is one of the giants, and so this person who's going to be ruling, at the head of some sort of a power structure and going to be doing miracles is receiving the throne of Satan, who is the leader of these aliens. And he is going to be the modern day Goliath. And then the son of David is coming, and the army that is coming is far greater than the army that is here. And the fallen angels and their Nephilim and their spaceships that are in the earth are surrounded by a larger army. And so when he's coming, he's going to defeat these guys and bring a new agent. And these are the signs of the times. These are the signs of the times. So the whole story really comes together. The Nephilim have been with us at key times in history, and they're here once again in fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
I have to say, I never quite heard it said the way you said it, and it puts a lot of things in perspective that we kind of as a society, we haven't put those pieces together. But for me, it puts a lot of things in perspective that, seem like those certain puzzle pieces were missing. I, for one, absolutely love Ali Marzulli. He's an amazing person. He's been on my show 3 times, and that's where I learned about my majority of my knowledge about the Nephilim. But it makes so much sense of why these abductions are taking place, and it's only certain people being abducted and not others.
Yes.
So for me, that kind of puts a lot of the puzzle pieces that, I'm somebody who, I do my show because I love to be able to learn and kind of plug things in so I can understand the whole picture, and that puts a lot more of the picture in perspective.
Wonderful.
We're definitely living in, we're definitely watching prophecy unfold, and it's amazing in a lot of ways to watch it unfold the way we are. It's, for me, it's exciting. That's one of the big reasons I do what I do. I notice the changes on the earth. I pay a lot of attention to the prophecy in the Bible of what's coming, and I watch it unfold as I'm reading it. And it's a crazy thing, to live, to once you finally realize that you're living the unfolding of the prophecy, it's a much more exciting thing, Yes,
absolutely. You're right. I agree. It brings meaning to life. You're not just in the rat race. You really are part of a magnificent story. And this is only the beginning. The earth is the birthplace, the incubation chamber of the immortal children of God. But we are being birthed through an organic process, and history itself, and life itself is that process. And the battle between good and evil, the pressure of that battle is the forging, the forces that are forging us. And God himself is not just about us. I mean, when we betray the laws of this kingdom or are condemned to death, God is put on trial. Satan essentially says to this assembly of these beings, because we see him in the book of Job, that he comes and he's in the assembly of the sons of God. He essentially is saying, look, is not God going to do good now according to his own laws and kill these guys for good, the death of the soul? Why? Because that's what his justice requires, and that is his way of getting us out of the way so that he can pursue his ambitions. But what God does is he decides that he's going to reveal through this story that's happening on this planet, not only to us, but to these other beings, he's going to reveal an aspect of his character. He's going to reveal himself as the very loving and compassionate one. And he is going to present himself as the one who comes and dies instead of us. And there apparently that was a provision made in his laws. That way, that atonement existed. The first time, ironically, that I learned about this was in the Tales of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, where Aslan, the king, he comes to be killed by the witch, and the witch is very happy that he's going to get Aslan out of the way. And suddenly, Aslan comes back to life, and he says to the witch, "You thought you knew all the laws, of the creation of Narnia, but I was there when the laws were written. And if innocent blood is shed on this particular day, on this full moon, etc., 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 it comes back to life." So when Satan thinks, I'm going to take my competition out of the way once again and murder the king, the Messiah, and put my own chosen one on the throne of the world, because he offers that to Christ, and Christ rejects it. And so he doesn't realize that very act is his undoing. That is incredible that God explains that in his scriptures beforehand in the prophetic writings. He encodes it in his laws, but he is able to blind men and angels to it until it is done, and then he removes the veil and he says, look, this is actually what just happened, and you helped make it happen. And so this is phenomenal. God decides to redeem and show his love not only to us but to these other beings. So the story of the Bible is not altered because of the reality of UFOs. for me and for many others, it was made more real. And the fact that the story may be happening in the universe and involve natural processes doesn't change anything about it. Whether God, imagines that a rock hurls through the galaxies and falls on top of Sodom and Gomorrah, or he sends his angels in spaceships who then use laser beams to destroy those cities, I really don't see. I don't. It doesn't make a difference to me how that happens. It doesn't make God any less. And we do see these angels who come and they appear to Lot, and they're so handsome that they're desired. So they're involved. There are these beings involved. And what is technology if not the reorganization of God's own physical universe? He created this. I mean, is not a tree a technology? Does it not provide oxygen to us? Is our own body is not a technology? So the reorganizing of matter according to a particular body of knowledge, that's what technology is. And these angels, they know more about the laws of creation than we do. And that's why they can very quickly clone things and splice and dice genes and travel through the vastness of the galaxies, because they know more about how this thing we're inside of operates. But God is the creator of these laws, and if God chooses to enter his creation and to create beings who are operating through the laws of his own creation, there's nothing demeaning. Of course, God is sovereign over these laws. But, so the story of the Bible really comes to life, I think, thanks to the modern day UFO phenomenon and the creation of hybrids. And in turn, the Bible then identifies these beings and gives them context and meaning and enlightens us concerning the true nature of reality, which is what we would expect, I guess, from God. If there was a God, we'd like to have some knowledge about what's going on. How did we get here? Who are we? Where are we going? What the hell's going on? We want to know. And so God is kind enough to say, well, let me explain it to you. So it's very simple. It was fascinating to see that it was all there, all along, on so many bookshelves. It's all there. All you have to do is open it up and start reading it.
Absolutely. I think that really puts things in a perspective that, people will really start thinking. My question for quite a number of years is, there's all these alien abductions and UFOs and stuff, and there's so few people, it only seems like a certain group of people or a certain type of people are, the ones being abducted. And it kind of seems like it stays in their family. Like if one of the parents was abducted or both of the parents, usually their children are abducted. And it kind of stays within a certain, group of people. And I always wondered why it was specifically kind of, I kept thinking, why do they only choose certain groups of people? Why is it that, most of these abductees come forward and they say, well, my father or my mother was abducted and now I was abducted. And it kind of puts it in perspective a little bit of why it kind of stays in those groups.
Yes, it's possible. That's my theory, that they are the descendants of older Nephilim. And so their genetics, they're better genetic material for this experiment of creating hybrids. They have a predisposition genetically to being more easily mixed and grafted in. But that's just my theory. We don't, at least I don't understand genetics at this level. I don't know for a fact that how extensive was the contamination of the Nephilim into the larger culture going back into the past. But I see that these guys, like the story of Goliath, had many descendants, and that these descendants were very much part of mixing and mingling with the rest of us. And so they, you look at the parable of Jesus. He says, this is the parable of the wheat the wheat and the chaff. It's a parable of God coming, and he plants his seeds in a garden. When the disciples say to Jesus, "What do you mean about this parable of how there was a gardener who planted his seeds in the garden, and the enemy came and planted his seeds in the garden. He says, well, God planted his seeds. Jesus explains the parable. God planted his seeds in the garden. And it's the wheat and the tares. Sorry, the wheat and tares. And while he was sleeping, the devil came and planted his seeds in the same garden. Jesus says that. He says God planted his seeds in the garden, and while he was sleeping, the devil came and planted his seeds in the garden. And now, the angels, the servants, Jesus interprets the servants in his story as angels, and he says, and the angels, they want to come and destroy and tear out, pull out the seeds of the devil and destroy it. And God says, no, don't do that yet, because it's very much connected to ours. And if you pull out his, you pull out ours. So wait until it's fully grown, and then we will pull out the tares and burn them and take the wheat and put it in the barn and salvage it. So the mixing of these seeds is maybe very deep and may not just be about a few Nephilim tribes that live in isolation. It may be really about how there has been a planet-wide historical contamination, and that these two seeds are mixed, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, at this point, and there's going to be an extraction. And what's interesting is that the term that's been used in that parable for tares is a term that in Jewish thought was understood. The tares were understood as modified wheat. That's how the tares were understood as. They were understood as modified wheat. They were a type of wheat, modified wheat. So it really ties into this idea of the hybrids and Nephilim being modified humans, essentially. Genetically modified humans by the infusion of a different genetic code. So the contamination may be wide, and so yes, it's possible that these abductees are in fact have these genes in them in a more dominant fashion, and that's why they are harvested for these experiments. So that's possible. It's my theory. I think that to finish off, I'd like to really say it's very important to really look at this whole story from a 30,000 feet altitude and to not miss the forest for the trees, which is that we are headed towards the second coming. That's one important conclusion. These are the signs of the times. 2, the story of the Bible is real, and we do need to make our peace with God and enter into his loving grace and know who Jesus of Nazareth was. It's a very important part of this story in the spiritual transformation, and we need to be prepared to live our lives, not focus on the future, live our lives for today, but be prepared that we are living in these very incredible times and that we are about to meet God, and that this battle between the heavens and the earth has become so intense on this planet at this point that Satan and his spaceships, are here taking a last stand. And the angels of God are here as well. And I do believe that they also use this technology. I do believe the forces are matched, and that's why a battle can happen. And they may be protecting us. They may be here in key places and intervening in key. Perhaps they're protecting Israel. But there comes a time where God orders them to stand down and the antichrist rises to the power. So these are important events that are ahead of us. And it has a happy ending. The good guys win. This is the dawn of a new age. We have always been protected. We've always been safe. And life has a meaning. And it has all been revealed to us through God's teachings, which have been recorded for the nations and for the generations. And it's good for us to open our hearts and minds to truth of these things and move forward.
I absolutely agree. I'm telling you, I learned a lot, and it puts so many things in more perspective now for me. Like I said, that's why I love what I do. And I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on and share this with us. And I really hope that it, kind of puts things in perspective for our listeners as well, because it kind of just makes so much more sense of, the whole UFO thing. And if we paid better attention, I think, when we read the Bible and kind of put it in that kind of perspective, I think it makes so much more sense.
I think so as well. Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. And people can watch the documentary by going to thinkagainproductions.com, and right there they can see the documentary UFOs, Angels, and Gods. And till next time, I look forward to our future chats.
Thank you. I do as well. I'd love to have you back on the show. You are absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.
Bye. That was an amazing interview, you guys. That's what I mean about learning so much and growing in what I do. And, you know, I love to bring that to you guys out there, my listeners, because to me, there's just so much more than, more than we can even imagine to know on this earth. And I love to learn. So, and I'm thinking a lot of you that are listening are just as interested in learning as well. So hopefully, maybe with what we're plugging in from all these great guests on the show are opening our minds a little bit to maybe we're really coming into knowing exactly what it is that God is revealing to us today. It is amazing. Well, that's all we have time for today. We post our shows on YouTube, and if you want to know more about our guests and upcoming shows, please visit our info2rail webpage. Just Google info2rail and click on our Google Sites page. I want to thank you so much, each and every one of you, for joining us here at info2rail. You guys are who makes it happen. The guests and the listeners, I wouldn't be able to do what I so love to do. And I want to thank God for the opportunity and the gift to do what I do and love so much. But I really want to extend a real big heartfelt thank you to all of you out there who, the guests that take the time out of their schedules to come on, and you listeners who take the time out of your busy lives to listen. You're all great, and I love you guys. We hope to see you here each and every week. We got some great interviews coming up. We have Mark Brinkeroff coming back on, and I'm pretty excited about that. So, hey, you guys, have a great day, and may God bless you and keep you, and may his face shine upon you in these uncertain times. We'll see you soon.